Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 3 on this case involving Pastor Andrew Brunson. And we're doing this today, and I'll tell you the reason why. We're about to go into the period of time where we are preparing witnesses for testimony. CC Holler, Senior Counsel, is going to talk about that and address it. But I just want to let you know that while it may not be on the news every day after today, the ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice, and our affiliates around the globe are working to secure the release of this pastor. So there's a lot of work going on that you're not going to probably be reading about or hearing over the next couple of weeks as we prepare for the next phase of this sham trial, which is what it is. I want to be clear on this, and I know we've had a lot of calls about this. Is there any chance that he would be acquitted? I mean, there's always a chance, but I don't think that's reality. This is a political move by Turkey, and we need to respond with diplomatic force in a very aggressive way. So let me give you the latest update on this because I think it's important for you to understand where it is. So we were on the broadcast yesterday talking about the status of the case, the fact that the case has now been reset for a May date, May 7th. No guarantee, by the way, that the Turks will keep that into the bargain, whether they actually bring the pastor to trial. But I will tell you, the pastor is in desperate shape, as you can imagine. So I want to first talk about his emotional state. As you can imagine, after a year and a half in jail, and the judge at the end of the proceedings makes the statement is, "What would you like us to do?" Basically, Cece, that's what he said. And then, so I want Cece to, we had contacts inside the courtroom telling us what was going on. And then, of course, we had Ambassador Brown back there. The Turks put this guy, the pastor, in a jail, one of the worst jails in Turkey, with an American ambassador at large for religious freedom and a sitting U.S. senator in the courtroom. And they still did this. And as Andy Economou said yesterday, this, we need a lot more stick and a lot less carrot right now, in my view. But Cece, you spoke to Noreen, his wife. You've heard that he's in very desperate shape.
He is in desperate shape. The worst thing that could have happened to him yesterday was being sent back to the original prison that he was at, the overcrowded, just horrible conditions. So that just broke him.
So at the end of the trial, though, they gave you this kind of glimmer of hope, even with him.
Right. That's right.
So paint the picture for what took place inside.
So it was a 13-hour trial.
Right.
For almost half of it, Pastor Brunson gave his defense eloquently and really beautifully. He did it. And then they brought in some of the secret witnesses the voices, and of course you couldn't see their face, voices garbled. And then at the end, the judge said, "Pastor Brunson, what is your request?" And he said, "I would simply like to be returned to the United States." So the judge goes into his summary, and it looked like possibly he would be released, which would have been an interim decision that the judge could have made. But unfortunately, at the end, he was not only not released, he was remanded to the worst prison he could be remanded
to. So, Andy, we talked about this yesterday in the broadcast, but the fact is, we know without a doubt that this is not a real trial. I call it a sham proceeding.
It is a sham proceeding. It's a joke. It's fake. The judge is receiving his orders from Ankara.
Right.
He's receiving his orders from Erdogan and Erdogan's stooges, who are telling him exactly what to do and how to do it. And they're telling him to stay out of releasing this pastor, keep this sham going as long as it can.
All right, we're going to have more on this, including the vice president reaching out to the pastor's wife yesterday. More on this, again, working tirelessly to secure his release. So pray for our legal team, but also pray for this pastor more important than anything else. And we'll give you an update on that in a moment. Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. This is our probably final day of major coverage until we get closer to the trial in the case involving Andrew Brunson. Let me give you an update here. And CC Howe, Senior Counsel, is with me, as well as Senior Counsel Andy Economou, Dr. Andrew Economou. Let me say this first. The Vice President reached out to Noreen, that's the wife of the pastor, late yesterday afternoon. What was the context of that discussion?
Yes, he made a personal phone call where he expressed his deepest concern, as well as the president's deepest concern, and promised to continue pressing for his release. and then also mentioned that he was going to follow up personally about getting Pastor Brunson transferred back to the better prison.
Yeah, so to me that's fine as an interim measure, but he should be transferred to the better facility. But that's not a solution to this. I mean, let's not lull into that. I mean, I appreciate what the vice president's saying. He's right. We need to get him into an interim situation that's better, but they need to release this American pastor, and that's exactly what we have. We have on the phone right now with us the pastor's daughter, Jacqueline. Jacqueline, I know you've been talking with your family about what's your sense of this. I know it's a very difficult time for your father and your mother and for your entire family. Tell us what your sense is.
Honestly, right now, the whole family is pretty disappointed. We'd had our hopes up for my dad being released yesterday, and when that didn't happen, and then he was moved to this overcrowded prison that had been really a hard place for him to be before. It's just a crushing blow to the family right now.
I think it's important for our audience, both on TV, radio, or that are listening to us around the country, around the world, actually, what your family was doing in Turkey, because these charges they have are just totally false. But what was your family doing in Turkey for 23? You grew up in Turkey, basically.
Yeah, I grew up in Turkey. My parents were there. They lived there for 23 years before all of this happened. And they ran a church. They had different ministries, like a house of prayer. And their whole life was dedicated to leading people to Christ and sharing the gospel and showing people God's love. That was their life's work. That's why they were in Turkey.
You know, Andy, you've talked about this, that, I mean, we call the charge Christianization because that's what's actually in the indictment.
That's correct.
But this pastor, and we got his daughter on the phone, Jacqueline, has been engaged in ministry for 23 years. You're a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, which has been engaged in Turkey for a long time. Clerics cannot even wear their clerical garb in public in Turkey.
No. Under the rules that have been set by the regime in Turkey, a Greek Orthodox priest, and remember, this was the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire. Christianity was St. Paul's footsteps are followed as we go through Asia Minor. Priests are not allowed to wear their robes, their cassocks in public. If you are a priest of the Greek Orthodox Church, for example, and you are visiting Constantinople or Istanbul to visit the Patriarchate, you've got to come in with a suit, with a coat and a tie, or an open shirt. You go to the Patriarchate, and there behind closed doors, behind the wall with this Patriarchate, you can then put on your clerical vestments.
Yeah, so this is what they're going through, and this is what's going on in Turkey. Now, Jacqueline, I think it's important for people to understand what your parent. Can you describe what happened when your father, initially your mother, were picked up by the Turkish officials?
Yes, actually, my parents had gone into the police station expecting to get their permanent residence permit. They expected to be living in Turkey forever and thought that the call was actually a good one. And then the next thing they know, they're having terror written down on their file, and they're told that they're going to be deported. Now, all of this happened, and they weren't even able to contact me, so I found out a few days later. And from the time that they were taken up until I think about 2.5 weeks later when my mom was released, my family had no news of what was happening. We just knew that something was really, really wrong.
Were you in Turkey at the time, or were you in school in the United States? I
was in the U.S. at the time.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I think this is something that people want to understand. What is life like in Turkey generally? You grew up there. I mean, you've been in Turkey most of your adult life, or most of your life. What is life like there right now?
Well, right now it's definitely changing from when I was there. But when I was in Turkey, I mean, I went to a normal school there. I went to church. I had my family and friends. The culture is very much, I would say, it's similar to culture and life in Europe, just a bit more of the Middle Eastern aspect mixed into it. To me, it was normal. It was my home. It was my life.
So, Andy, we've talked about this before, and we've studied this a couple years back. And I mean, it was in a strange twist of reality that we're dealing with. We studied this issue of Turkey's continued Islamization, which is what's happening here.
Right.
And they pick out the phrase, as I've said, I keep saying it, Christianization. We're talking to Jacqueline. Her family was living there for 23 years without any issues, and now all of a sudden we're in a situation right now where over the last several years things have changed radically on the ground.
And we saw this in our Oxford Center book, and that Burning Bridges, Jay. This is an important book, and it really details in great depth and with great understanding and analytical ability what has happened to Turkey. Turkey has become an authoritarian regime. It is no longer the Turkey of Ataturk turning toward the West, getting rid of the fez, getting rid of the Arabic alphabet, replacing it with Western letters, okay?
Right.
Trying to bring Turkey into the modern world. It has changed significantly. Now, what Pastor Brunson's daughter said, yes, growing up in her lifetime, but it has emerged and evolved into a repressive regime. Alcohol. I was only there 2 or 3 years ago, and when the Pope visited the Patriarchate, you could get wine at the Ritz-Carlton. Today, only 3 years later, you cannot get a drink of wine at the Ritz-Carlton.
And this used to be, so this was they were Western, in a more of a Western mindset, and that's changed. And Jacqueline, I think it's important, again, to focus on what your family's going through. You've gotten married. Your father was not there for that. Graduations from school, your father was not there for. Tell me what this is like for you. I think it's very important for our audience to understand what it's like, what your family's going through here.
It's been very difficult because from the very day that this all started a year and a half ago, I kept thinking, okay, this has to end soon. This has to have a quick resolution. And it's just kept dragging on. So every day has been filled with uncertainty and that question of, is today the day, or how much do I keep postponing events in my own life to wait for my dad to honor him? Like I got married, but I still hadn't had a wedding because I promised my dad that he would walk me down the aisle. I graduated from school, which my dad helped me get through. He helped me plan my program, and he wasn't there to see that. Neither of my parents were. So a lot of life events have now been experienced on my own without my family there, which is pretty painful.
So I want our audience to, I'm glad that Jacqueline's calling in to talk to us, because I think it's important for you to understand what the family's going through. Cece, we saw another side of this, and this will be painful for Jacqueline, so I don't want to get in detail, but there was no question from talking with Ambassador Brownback and the words we've got from Senator Tillis and others, that this was a very emotional moment at the end of this trial.
It was. Pastor Brunson.
The day one of the trial.
Absolutely. He was distraught and hopeless. And like Jacqueline shared, he is now back in the prison where he lost the 50 pounds, where the days were dark for him there. And, you know, after he was transferred, at least he got back a little bit of hope. And now he's right back in the situation that just drained him and almost destroyed him. Yeah,
so this is the reality on the ground. Jacqueline, I know you probably have spoken with your mother since at least the first day of this trial is over. What was your sense there? I know this is very tough for her.
I would say, I only talked to my mom for 5 minutes because it was a really long trial, and getting there and getting back took a lot of time, and it was just an emotionally draining day. But what I got from that is it was difficult for my dad. It was difficult for my mom having to sit through that, listen to these accusations, and then my dad being sent back to this overcrowded prison. I was told that that's when he really broke down. He'd held up pretty well throughout the rest of it, but that's when he really felt crushed.
Yeah.
He was going back to this place that was so difficult for him.
Yeah, let me go to Than Benner, Director of Governmental Affairs. Than, the urgency situation here now is acute. I mean, there's no question about it. What are you hearing right now? But also, we've got to, we've got to get into a different dialogue with Turkey on this.
You just have to. You heard it right there from Jacqueline, I think, Jay. I think the United States sent a message by sending Ambassador Brownback and Senator Tillis to be in the room. But here's the reality. Turkey sent a message right back by sending Pastor Brunson back to this prison. So, Jay, to me, the answer is very simple. It's unequivocal. This would be the worst time for the United States to stand down. They have got to stand up. I will tell you, the fact that the vice president has already reached out and called Noreen, I think, is a great sign that they are going to do just that. But look, it can't be just the president and the vice president and the ambassador. It has got to be both houses of Congress. It's got to be the House and the Senate. It's got to be all layers of government. Jay, the United States government, over this next 3 weeks, they must speak with one voice on behalf of an innocent citizen who's imprisoned on the other side of the world. That's the only answer here.
Jacqueline, let me ask you this, or let me tell you this. We've got everybody that's listening to this broadcast around the world is praying for you and your family, for your dad and for your mom and for your entire family. And know we are working aggressively to secure his release, doing everything we can, but praying that we get the result here, that is the release of your father from captivity. So please let your family know we're not only continuing, we're doubling our efforts on this case for your family. Thanks for being with
my
us.
My family thanks you all so much. Thank you.
All right, Jacqueline. Jacqueline's the daughter of Pastor Andrew Brunson. Hey, folks, this is pray for the release of this pastor. We're doing everything we can legally. We need a miracle here. This is a situation where, we've been in this situation before in other cases. This is as dire as anyone we've been in. We really need your help on this. Pray for this pastor and his family. We'll be back with more in a moment. Hey, welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. We just heard from Jacqueline, Pastor Andrew Brunson's daughter. And this situation is, as I said, is dire, and we're doing everything we can. I'm going to go right back up to Washington. Than, there was an ambassador for the United States in the courtroom. There was embassy staff in the courtroom. There was a sitting U.S. senator in the courtroom. International press, I'm holding a stack of international press, were there in force. And the end result is the Turks send him to a prison that's worse, as if to send a message back to the United States.
It was to send a message back to the United States, Jay, because all of that you talked about happened after the president of the United States talked to the president of Turkey and after the vice president engaged specifically. Look, this was a political message, and so the United States needs to respond in a political fashion. And what do I mean by that? There are a lot of levers, a lot of leverage that can be used. It starts with small things like dollars to Turkey. It also involves security partnerships and the rest. But, Jay, here's the big one. It involves leveraging our allies to put pressure on Turkey in a multilateral way. It means multiple nations. It means the United Nations. It means a full around-the-globe effort. Yes, it starts with the president, but, Jay, it goes through every level of the bureaucracy and every level of elected politicians as well.
We know the United Nations is their arbitrary detention committees looking at it. Do it. This is where this is getting to the land of the absurd. Okay, Turkey's a NATO ally, and I think we've got to. I think what Than said is right. We've got to hit it on all cylinders: multilateral, multi-agency, multi-governmental. Other governments getting involved. We better deploy these assets too, including these ambassadors that are still not confirmed. Mike Pompeo, the incoming Secretary of State. But, Andy, they are entrenched. There's no doubt they sent a message or tried to send a message back to the United States on this. And let me play first. Here's Erdogan. Here's what he said about what's going on here. So don't think there's no hidden secret. This is exactly what they're doing.
The Americans tell us, give us the pastor back. But you have a cleric as well. Give him to us. Then we'll try your pastor and give him to you.
Yeah, listen to what this exchange is. Give us our cleric back, and then we'll try your pastor and give him to you. So that trial, by the way, could go on for 10 years, because that's how that's part of what you're facing here, Cece.
That's correct. It's not like a trial in the United States that is, plays out in one consecutive sweep. This is one where we saw yesterday or 2 days ago was the first day of the trial. Now the next day is May 7th.
So there is, I want to, again, we talked about this briefly yesterday. I want to say it again, then I'm going to go into tell you what we're doing now. But, Andy, this is not I called it in the beginning of the broadcast, a sham proceeding.
This is a terrorist proceeding. It's a Stalinist-style show trial. It's being put on by the Turks because we are holding, they claim, Fethullah Gulen, and they want him back, and they said, we'll give your pastor a trial, and then we'll turn him back. That's not the way it goes. You're innocent until you're proven guilty in any civilized court. Turkey is moving east when it should be moving west. And it's moving back into the days of the dark days of the Sultanate, with Erdogan being the Sultan in charge and making these ridiculous pronouncements. Jay, this court, I want to just, I look at this indictment in this case. I read a document from the very top. Republic of Turkey, the Office of Chief Public Prosecutor, Terror and Organized Crime Bureau. A pastor, an American Protestant pastor who has been in Turkey for 23 years, who was not even there when the coup against Erdogan was generated, who then went back, is now being accused of crimes, including Christianization. What a terrible crime that is, yep. Of course, by the Terror and Organized Crime Bureau of the Turkish government. How ridiculous is that?
It's absurd, but what we've got to do now as we work on the multilateral aspect of this and we work on the governmental aspect is we also have to prepare for this sham trial. It is a sham trial. So, Cece, I think it's important we've got almost a dozen witnesses that you're dealing with across the globe, literally.
Yes.
And these witnesses so far are coming. What are you? Let people understand what you're doing, what the process is here. Even though this trial we know is a sham, we still have to put up the evidence.
Right. And May 7th will be the first time that we'll actually be able to bring our witnesses. So that's, yes.
We have no guarantee.
Supposedly,
Folks,
no
listen,
guarantee.
That's on May 7th?
That's on May 7th.
You understand, though, everybody, that on May 6th or May 7th that morning, they could cancel the trial. There's no proceeding. There's no motion to set a trial aside. They just do it. But always go ahead.
Right. So that will be the first, May 7th will be the first time, if it happens, that we'll be able to present witnesses in defense. And so it's going through a 62-page indictment, seeing what their accusations are, and then preparing the witnesses that we will put on in defense of Pastor Brunson.
So you're talking about multiple time zones around the globe to get the witnesses. But again, the trial, this is not a real trial. Now, Fan, I want to go right back up to this point, and that is, what are the proposals on the table right now on sanctioning Turkey on this?
Well, there's a number of them, Jay. Some of them have already been leveraged. I know Senator Langford has another package that he wants to engage in. And look, sanctions have to be part of the picture. But, Jay, I think the most important thing is for the United States to speak with clarity back. You know, the Turkey says this is about Fethullah Gulen. Jay, the United States is not holding Fethullah Gulen.
Right.
He is a free man here in the United States. That is not the same thing as imprisoning an American citizen on the other side of the world for Christianization. So our government at every layer, yes, sanctions have to be on the table. But first of all, they have to be able to respond with clarity to the Turkish government, who is conflating two very different situations. One, a man who is living free, not held by the United States government, and the other, an American pastor who's been in prison for a year and a half before his first day in a courtroom. That's the first thing they've got to communicate.
Well, I mean, you heard Jacqueline, the daughter's words here. I mean, this is is indescribable grief they're in here. I mean, you're not going to. Here's what the problem is. They are digging their heels in, and we have the ability to dig our heels in much tougher than the Turks. And I think we have to. We've got to ratchet this up. As I said, the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, members of Congress are reaching out, but it's taking more than that now. And that may mean the community of nations has to get together on this, which I will tell you, the coverage has been that way. The media coverage has been global here. But we have to have the community of nations condemning this act, because this is Turkey playing a political game. Andy?
It is a political game, and the Turks are very good at playing political games. They've played them for centuries. They know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly how to do it. They've played political games since the time of the Turkish invasions of the Balkans and of the Eastern Roman Empire. But we have to realize this attitude that is taken. This is an attitude that understands one response, Jay, and that response is force. I'm not necessarily talking about military force, but as you said, the force of world and global opinion. What Chancellor Merkel did when they imprisoned the journalist. She said, "You want him out? You want missiles? You get him out. Otherwise, no missiles." They cut them. She gave the missiles back. She said no missiles, and they said no. We want the missiles, and therefore we're going to let the German journalist out. There are more journalists in prison in Turkey today than in any other country of the world. I think it's 150 journalists who are in prison. It's not a free nation. This trial is a joke.
Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast. As we come to you each every week on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, I want to thank TBN for allowing us to bring you this broadcast. It doesn't cost the ACLJ any dollars for airtime. That's because of your support for TBN. Let me ask you to do this on this special broadcast. Pray for this pastor. Really essential that we be praying for this pastor and for his release. We'll talk to you next week.